Hello and good afternoon, everyone. We welcome you all to our EdTech Lounge. For those of you who are attending our EdTech Lounge for the first time, EdTech Lounge is a virtual space for faculty members to learn from each other. Each week, we have a presenter who is going to share his or her experience with online and remote teaching and learning. For other faculty members who have already started their online teaching or maybe are struggling to transition to online teaching, it would help them learn from their experiences and challenges. So our presenter for today is Dr. Almina Pardhan. Dr. Almina is an academic with teaching and research background in early childhood education, early childhood development, and teacher education with a focus on literacy, gender issues, family engagement, diversity, child assessments, and research methods. Dr. Almina works at the Khan University Institute of Educational Development as an assistant professor and coordinator early childhood education and development program. She has earned her doctorate from the University of Toronto, Canada. Her doctorate research explored gender issues in early childhood education in Pakistan. Dr. Almina has taught PhD programs, diploma certificate, and CPD courses. Her teaching experience and interest in face-to-face, online, and blended learning modes. She has led major research and development projects in Pakistan in early childhood education, childhood development, and teacher education. Dr. Almina also collaborates with health professionals in research and teaching on early childhood education. As a specialist in early childhood development and childhood education, she has supported government and preschools to scale interventions in Pakistan, supported communities to scale interventions in diverse global contexts, build and manage diverse teams, led organizational strategic directions. With this, I would like to invite Dr. Almina Pardhan to our EdTech Lounge today. Over to you, Dr. Almina.
Thank you very much, Abir, for the very kind introduction. I will share my slides now. Okay, a virtual good afternoon to everyone, wherever you are around the world. Thank you to the Aga Khan University Network of Quality Teaching and Learning for the opportunity to share my experiences with you today, for their assistance to help me prepare for today's talk, and for all the assistance we've been receiving during this period of having to rapidly transition to remote distance learning. I also wish to acknowledge colleagues with whom I have been teaching virtually and who have contributed greatly to the learning experiences that I'm sharing with you today. This is precious time in the midst of semester, and I'm really grateful to all of you who have joined today's session. Through this talk and exchange of experiences, I hope to give you a glimpse into the window of my story as I've attempted to navigate the humanness element in transitioning to remote teaching and learning with different audiences over the past few months. I begin first with a feelings poll. Then I share with you briefly humanness elements in my pedagogy with face-to-face and online teaching in the normal before the period of COVID-19. And thereafter, I will talk about how I have attempted to create this humanness in the current normal of COVID-19 distancing, with particular focus on using synchronous modes, which have been a completely new experience for me. Thereafter, the session will open for reflections, questions, and responses. Oops. So let's start with a quick feelings poll. The poll is going to be launched. It's there on your screen. And you may select more than one response to describe how you have been and or are feeling. It is anonymous. No one will know what you have shared. So there are 3 choices to select from: tired and ticking like a tortoise, curious and climbing like a cat, overwhelmed and burying my head like an ostrich, busy and buzzing like a bee, gracefully and gently moving along like a giraffe, bumbling around like a bear. So we see responses coming. Gracefully and gently moving along like a giraffe, is in the lead. Busy and buzzing like a bee is next. Others? Okay, so I'm going to end the polling here in two seconds if you want to put anything else in there. Right. So, these are our results. Tired and ticking like a tortoise, 6%. Curious and climbing like a cat, 18%. Overwhelmed and burying my head like an ostrich, 12%. Busy and buzzing like a bee, 35%. And happy to see gracefully and gently moving along like a giraffe in the lead with 59%. That's great. Okay. So in my early childhood field of specialty, working with parents, teachers, and the youngest of learners, I place high value on supporting to build meaningful and caring relationships between infants, toddlers, and preschool-age children with their parents, practitioners, teachers, and other important caregivers in their lives. This is a critical element that science tells us supports healthy child development, growth, and learning. Building meaningful experiences for teachers and parents is also something I highly value in facilitating sessions for teachers and parents. My physical classroom space, which you see in the images on the screen just now, is a powerful place where I can connect with my students. I bubble with energy. My practice includes stories, songs, including a greeting song where I welcome each participant by their name for each day's session. Assalamu alaikum, Noreen. How are you? How are you? How are you today? My face-to-face classroom pedagogy is highly interactive, hands-on activities, and a place where I pay close attention, creating an authentic, welcoming, inviting, and safe classroom environment to build human connection for a community of learners. What I deeply value is being able to read my students' nonverbal cues, which tell me whether they are connecting meaningfully or if I need to make adjustments in my teaching to better support their learning. I believe that this models for them to, in turn, be mindful and aware of cues to build healthy relationships with children in their care. The early years are an important time. About 10 years ago, I began to engage in online teaching and learning for the Aga Khan Development Network Science of Early Child Development course as part of the AKDN's and AKU's efforts to support global capacity development for early child development, in line with AKU Chancellor's guidance for strategic investment in this field. This transition was an enormous shift for me. As part of a cascade model, I was first a learner on the course, and thereafter was mentored to instruct and eventually became a mentor instructor. As a participant, it felt very strange not to have the kind of human connection with my instructors and fellow course participants that I experienced in face-to-face sessions. The welcome video on the course was important for me to be able to see my instructors and hear their voices. I could put a voice and face to a name. As the course progressed and as I transitioned to becoming an instructor with mentorship by my own course instructors, I began to feel more comfortable, though I must say not to the same degree as when I'm teaching face-to-face or having a face-to-face learning experience as a learner. I learned many valuable strategies like creating participant and instructor profiles with photographs, how to facilitate dynamic, engaging, and reflective discussions in the discussion forum, especially in the way questions or ideas are used to begin a discussion with learners. Referring to each participant by name and responding to them in the discussion forum was also a special way to create authentic connection. For example, some of the ways in which we would respond is, welcome to week 1. We look forward to an engaging learning experience with you as we explore early brain development. Or another example, thank you, Almina, John, and Sarah. It is wonderful to read your engaging discussion about experiences of working with teachers and parents in your context to support their understanding of early brain development. I wonder if you could share a bit more about how you set up workshops for them. What I also learned for authentic online teaching and learning was how to create an authentic, visually appealing VLE space that participants felt happy to come to and participate comfortably, like you see on the slide of one of the courses I've designed. Being an online course participant first was extremely helpful for me to better empathize with my course participants when I took on the role of instructor. This experience and redesigning into blended learning mode, the AKU Institute for Educational Development Graduate MEd Early Childhood Education and Development elective, which I had done through AKU's Faculty Development Program for Blended Learning, all gave me confidence to create, in the words of Michael Ralph, a spice of humanity in online material as well. Oops. Then came March 23rd, 2020 in Pakistan. COVID-19 entered our part of the world without any passport, without any visa, or no letter of invitation, requiring all of us to rapidly transition to being ready for remote teaching and learning. I would like to draw your attention to this slide. Does this image and text title with the image resonate with any of you? You can use the chat box to drop your reflection about how you think it might connect or maybe not connect with your experience. So if you could take a moment and just drop in the chat box how you feel this is connecting or maybe not connecting to your own experiences.
Sure. So we've got a response. It pretty much reflects the current situation. We felt a huge separation, and I'm assuming, I think, between the students and teachers. Self-reflection, I participate in my, okay, somebody's still writing.
Oops. Okay.
Okay, so feeling the same. I think people are sort of resonating with the picture that has been shared. Uncertainties.
Okay. The title is also very interesting. When I saw it together with Abir today, Panic Goji, teaching online classes during the coronavirus pandemic, it just struck, how some people may be feeling having to transition so quickly to remote distance learning. Okay, so just move on then. So for me, though the learning curve has been steep, what I felt fortunate was my learning experiences earlier with online and blended learning teaching, which I think has helped me with the learning curve. Nevertheless, when a request came my way in late March to conduct a webinar for parents of young children as part of public service by our university, I found myself thrown into the deep end, trying to quickly learn how to use Zoom to facilitate synchronous sessions. I had some familiarity with Zoom, having used it for meetings and to attend webinars. However, attending a meeting and a webinar that someone else has developed was nowhere close to what it meant for me to teach using Zoom. As I learned and continue to learn how to use Zoom by reading about it and using it to teach, the human element is always at the forefront for me, and oftentimes creates dilemma and raises questions for me in my experiences as a teacher and about experiences my students may be going through as learners. I now share briefly with you some of the ways in which I've attempted to create humanness in the teaching experiences I have had over the past few months with parents, early childhood educators, and graduate students. Many of my prior experiences participating in webinars have been as a passive learner. Literature has highlighted that webinars focused mainly on lecture often make people phase out and start multitasking with other activities as the webinar is running. However, I had participated in a few live webinars around the time when I was beginning to prepare for my first set of parent webinars. Three things stuck with me about how the facilitator enabled interaction amongst participants. First was their use of chat box with reflective questions posed during the session, and with smaller groups, the use of raise hand for participants to speak. Second was how facilitators and presenters used their voice to show energy, enthusiasm, and joyfulness to be with a virtual group of learners. And third, where they used slides, the slides complemented what they were saying and were also not so busy like the one you see on the screen that it took away attention from the speaker. I sought guidance from colleagues in QTLnet about how I might use Zoom effectively, and they echoed the same things that I had experienced in these webinars and read in the literature. More importantly, QTLnet recommended that I do a mock session before any sessions to get a practical experience. This would help me to be better aware of what resonates with my authentic teaching style and how I could build connections with my students and support them to build connections amongst each other. So I did a mock session with a few practitioners who I've closely worked with for a number of years. What did I learn about myself and them as a learner beyond my screen? First, I learned how vulnerable I felt turning on my video to teach. I have turned my video on now for you today, and I still feel the same sense of vulnerability, but not as intense. It has gotten slightly more comfortable with experience now of facilitating 6 parent webinars, 3 continuing professional education courses for early years teachers, and a webinar as part of AKUID's admissions process. I've come to know when I feel a sense of safety to turn on my video and when I feel this less. What creates this feeling of vulnerability? Not knowing how others are reacting or responding to my verbal and nonverbal cues, not knowing if someone out there is recording me and where the recording may end up with a click of a button, not knowing if I might need to move elsewhere for better internet connectivity from this pleasant, authentic background you see behind me, and how that might feel for me for the visual comfort for myself and for the participants as well. I also learned that perhaps my attempt to try to build connection with participants by having them turn on their videos may actually result in their feeling less connected and tense, depending upon the environment, mostly the home environment in which they presently are. Maybe the space in their home where they are sitting or their physical appearance doesn't make them feel comfortable being seen on a camera. Maybe sociocultural norms also create discomfort for them to be seen on camera. They may have similar apprehensions as I have of being recorded. If I asked you just now, without any prior communication before this session today, to open your videos, perhaps some of you may feel the same kind of discomfort or apprehension. Don't worry, you don't need to turn on your video, though I would love to see the faces of each one of you who I'm addressing, to see you, smile at you, and read your nonverbal cues to know if what I'm saying is connecting with you or not. A powerful tool for me to create feelings of humanness and connection has become the chat box. What have I learned about the chat box? First, I learned how to open it. A big first step. Yay. Then I learned that dropping a brief hello and welcome in it, just as Abir did this afternoon and Azra, as people are getting settled, is very meaningful for them. As I feel people are now becoming more used to using Zoom as learners, I've also noticed that they are more likely to respond now than I felt was the case in earlier webinars that I conducted in April. Two simple strategies I've also used to help orient participants, especially parent participants who may not be used to using Zoom, is using features like the chat box. Is the images that you see. This image on the screen right now is usually the first screen of my sessions. And we walk participants through, and then the question you see on the screen where they can start to practice writing in the chat box by introducing themselves is really helpful for them. And especially when people drop off and they come back on, this gives them a really nice prompt to bring them back together with the group when the instruction is written on the screen. I also build in questions and statements throughout the session, which invite interaction and facilitate keeping learners engaged and having less likelihood they would multitask with other activities. After all, much effort and energy goes into preparing webinars, and if the learner is disengaged, it can feel rather disappointing. I also request each participant through email before the start of any session to use their first and last names on their device name. Without this, no one is allowed entry. This facilitates my being able to call. Just a second. This facilitates my being able to call participants by name. It is most awkward for me to call or talk to someone addressing them as, "Thank you, Galaxy Tab S6 Lite. You have shared a very thoughtful idea about teaching young children through stories." Instead, being able to say, "Thank you, Elizabeth. You have shared a very thoughtful idea about teaching young children through stories," feels more meaningful and authentic, showing care for the participant. Allowing entry to only those with names identified also helps to maintain security and protect us as community of learners with potential risks of someone intruding on a session. Additionally, and thanks to the great digital boot camps arranged by QTLnet, I have also begun to include different applications like Kahoot and Padlet as strategies to facilitate interaction and a community of learners. Two brilliant pieces of advice from literature and our QTLnet colleagues for me have been: first, learn and become familiar with one virtual learning tool at a time. And second, which I've shared earlier, before each session, have a mock session to practice alignment of content and pedagogy with use of different tools for the learning experience, especially if it requires interaction and participant engagement. As one of our QTLnet colleagues nicely put for me yesterday, I'm a driver, taking learners as passengers along with me. Driving lessons and confidence to drive the car would make it more likely that passengers would feel safe enough to want to sit in my car. It would be rather hazardous and risky for them to enter the car if I was still learning and didn't know where the brake pedal is. It may feel their time is being wasted, or they may feel disappointed not to get the experience they were hoping to have, including value for money invested to attend and participate. Though I have learned to be a more skilled driver, taking my students more confidently on a journey of learning over Zoom, in the initial days of April and early May, I was still jerking the brake and the clutch and had students along with me who I must say were very brave, compassionate, and patient to get into this car with me. Thankfully, my very first webinar had only 7 people to start with, over time growing and growing to almost 200 people on one occasion. Yesterday, I had a unique experience of using MS Teams to teach. I have used it for meetings, including sharing screen, but never for teaching. Colleagues, including our Vice Provost, Dr. Tashmin, have cautioned about using it to teach and that Zoom is the preferred option. So the saying goes, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. And boy, oh boy, by doing yesterday, did I understand and come to know that I will probably never do teaching again on MS Teams, and certainly not without a mock. I felt lost with no sense of control over the features once I started to share my screen and use the chat box. I couldn't bring them up at the same time. I couldn't see participant names. and I just simply felt disconnected and unable to engage meaningfully in a way I have now come to feel with Zoom. We eventually stopped as it wasn't working for me and moved over to Zoom. I felt really bad for the learners, and I'm thankful for their understanding and forgiveness. Thankfully, these are participants with whom I've established a relationship of trust, teaching them over time. And so I've passed my test, I think. It says you passed. My hair's not quite as blonde like that, as you can see, brown. So happy teacher, happy participants in the back, see? But still some bumps and hurdles along the way, such as connectivity issues, lockdown continuing, not knowing what's going to happen next. But I have the spare tire just in case with my backup plan. So I would like to end this part of the presentation by asking you to reflect on what special memories you would like to create for your students during this very challenging time. And a big bouquet, I think, for all of us. You, we are all extraordinary, doing our best under extraordinary circumstances. A choice of flowers, a choice of colors, pick whichever one you want, and I hope it makes you feel very happy today. Thank you. I hope these few insights I've shared have been of help, and we'll stop here for questions or comments that you may have.